Crossovers are bananas. All your favorite heroes and villains from different universes are joined together in order to fight for supremacy in the ultimate display of their special powers and abilities. It's like a fan's wet dream. Well, there's also the chance of things going horribly wrong. Sometimes the various series in question just don't mesh together very well, and sometimes different artists just don't fully understand what makes a certain thing be the thing that everyone likes quite like the original creators do. And the characters end up feeling out of, well, character. And now that I've finished my pointlessly long digression, I'm happy to say that Lost Heroes is the good kind of crossover, and just another example of how PSP owners outside of Japan got screwed over. Released in September of 2012, Lost Heroes is part of a long-running franchise, the Compati Hero series. Long story short, it's a crossover of 3 individual franchises. First is the Ultra franchise, which features people with the ability to transform into giant humanoids. The franchise began in 1966 and has since had many sequels. Lost Heroes features 5 in particular: Ultraman, Ultra 7, Ultraman Taro, Ultraman Mebius, and Ultraman Zero. Second is the Kamen Rider series, which is as classic transforming superhero as it gets. The protagonists have the power to transform into the Kamen Riders, or Masked Riders in English. They wear fancy suits that grant them all kinds of superpowers and gadgets, with which they fight to protect the world. Since the first iteration in 1971, the franchise continues strong to this day. Lost Heroes features 5 entries: the original Kamen Rider Black RX, Kamen Rider Deno, Kamen Rider W, and Kamen Rider O's. These 2 series are part of the so-called tokusatsu genre, which is primarily defined by its particular mix of live action, special effects, and people wearing rubber. It also commonly includes elements of kaiju, or giant monsters, such as Godzilla. In the West, the most direct comparison would be the Power Rangers franchise, but that's a really big rabbit hole and I'm not going to jump into it. The other series is about giant friggin' robots, and also space opera and war drama, I guess. Although the Compati Hero series doesn't exactly feature the mainline Gundam series. Instead, you have the SD Gundam sub-series. SD stands for Super Deformed, and if you've consumed any kind of animated media, you've probably seen SD to some degree. There aren't any exact definitions of what constitutes as super deformed, but basically any kind of design with squishy proportions, namely large heads and small torsos, can be considered SD. Within the context of SD Gundam, they are defined by sentient versions of the mecha from the mainline series. They can speak and think for themselves, and typically feature personalities based on the characters that piloted the respective unit in the source material. But here's the thing. There's this series of video games called SD Gundam Chi Generation, and, well, aside from very specific exceptions, they don't actually feature the SD Gundam series. The SD in the name simply refers to the art style, rather than the plot and characters. It's the same situation with works such as Super Robot Wars, which have SD designs but for the most part don't feature the SD Gundam franchise. One key difference is that the SD Gundam characters have actual eyes, rather than just the usual array of visors seen in the source material. Either way, I'm only making this whole thing more confusing than it has to be, so let's move on. Lost Heroes primarily features Char's Counterattack, Zeta Gundam, G Gundam, Gundam Wing, and Gundam 00. The story begins with Ultraman Zero waking up in the middle of wherever this is. Alone and confused in this unknown place, Zero has no choice but to push forward. Soon enough, he finds a pair of enemies, but turns out that he's completely powerless against them. New Gundam and Kamen Rider O's rescue him in the nick of time, but just like Zero, they lost their powers and have no idea of what's going on. They press on together, but it doesn't take long until trouble starts brewing up again. Space monster King appears in front of the three heroes, completely overpowering the trio. Left with no other choice, they can only try and escape the beast's wrath. At the end of the dungeon, they find a strange opening, into which they hastily jump. On the other side, the party finds a mysterious place that reminds them of their original worlds. It seems that they somehow got teleported to a world where their own worlds got meshed together into a spicy mess. And thus, they set out on a journey to discover what happened to their powers, why the worlds joined together, and to find a way back home. Which of course will involve a lot of combat, a lot of preparation, and a lot of autistic map filling to quell your OCD when you're missing just that little square over in the corner. Lost Heroes is a first-person dungeon crawler. You explore the various cubes, clearing each tile one by one from the point of view of your party, discovering treasures, fighting enemies, and trying to not get wrecked every 5 minutes. Yeah, it's one of those. At the start. Battles are played out in a turn-based fashion, where characters can perform the usual array of actions like using regular attacks, special skills, defend, use items, or try to run away like a pussy. Aside from a few specific story moments and sub-quests, you're free to set up your party however you want. It can be a mix of all three groups of characters, it can be all Riders or all Ultraman or all Gundam, it can be balanced between offense and defense, it can be all offense, it can be all defense, etc. Personally, I go all Gundam since that's what I'm most familiar with, but the choice is yours. Abilities vary between individual characters, but Ultraman typically have the highest base stats in exchange for being limited by the color timer, this little ball in their status bar. This thing cycles every 3 turns, and when it's blue, Ultraman can fight at their full strength, but when it's red, their stats are greatly lowered, but their critical chance is also greatly increased. The Kamen Riders have a fairly balanced set of stats, although mostly focused on physical attacks. Their skills carry a varied selection of elemental attributes, which can be useful against certain enemies. The Gundams, on the other hand, tend to have high speed and low HP, attacks that hit multiple times, and quite a few support skills. They are also the only group with characters that hit all enemies with their regular attack. Characters gain ability points from battles, which are used to unlock and upgrade skills in the skill tree. The skill tree is a tree of skills. You start all the way on the left, and to unlock the following skills, you must reach a certain level in one of the previous skills. These are the usual sort of skills that can either do damage or provide some beneficial effect during combat, and also passive skills that increase force capacity and the hero gauge, which I will get to in a moment. Simple stuff, right? But don't forget the fact that Lost Heroes isn't just a dungeon crawler, but also a fan service game. Certain skills are categorized as crossover skills, and involve 2 characters participating in a single attack. Double Rider kicks? Yeah, those are a thing. Double God fingers? Yeah, it's got those too. Voice actor jokes? You will have to wait until Lost Heroes 2 for that. There are 2 types of those. The first one is more general use, like the double rifle skill that can be used by any 2 Gundam characters. Except for God Gundam, because he's a loser without a rifle. Unfortunately, these skills don't have a unique animation, instead simply showing the 2 characters' respective skills. The other type of crossover skill is more interesting, requiring 2 specific characters who then perform a unique move. Either way, crossover skills require you to spend part of the hero gauge, which is this yellow thingy on the status bar. It increases as characters deal and receive damage, and the maximum can be raised from the starting 3 points through certain passive skills. Just keep in mind that the gauge is reset if the characters are knocked out. The hero gauge can also be used for 2 other things. One is to activate Drive, which spends 1 section of the hero gauge in order to use any regular skill at 1 level higher, even if you have already maxed out that skill. The final use for it is hero skills, which are basically super moves or ultimate moves or whatever. They are very powerful moves that come with a fancy animation and play a rendition of one of the source material's music tracks. At the end of each battle, you can earn bonuses if you did well enough, increasing the booty you collect. These can be things like finishing the battle in a single turn or not receiving any damage, which, while not essential, do incentivize you to be as effective as possible. At any point, you can return to the base that the party found at the start. This place will serve as your base of operations, so get used to seeing this screen a lot. From here, you can select what party members to bring with you, buy and sell basic supplies like healing items and equipment, and analyze the chips you have obtained from fallen enemies. Characters who aren't currently in the party can be assigned to do one of 4 things. They can upgrade the base's training facilities, earning them experience points. They can be placed on maintenance duty, earning you money. They can be sent to gather resources, earning you items. And finally, they can work on upgrading the casino, unlocking more of its functionality, which I'll get to in a few minutes. It's an Ouroboros of grinding, but it makes sure that the bench warmers aren't totally useless and are still ready to fight whenever you bring them with you into one of the dungeons. Characters have a single slot for regular equipment and multiple slots in which you equip items called forces. Defeating enemies lets you acquire chips. Certain boss monsters will always drop their chip, while regular enemies have a chance of dropping theirs, and fulfilling certain combinations of chips unlocks a force that you can then equip on one of your party members. These forces have a variety of bonuses, like simple stat increases or allowing the character to cast certain skills, or providing more specific effects, such as making the character less prone to being targeted. However, they also require a certain amount of force capacity, which starts at 15 but can be increased with certain passive skills. On the other hand, regular equipment can also be upgraded. This can be done up to 5 times per equipment piece, and is done by adding the properties of the various materials you find throughout the game, in exchange for money. These properties include stat boosts and passive effects, like higher resistance to a certain element. Another facility you can visit is the quest room, which gives you quests. It's pretty straightforward. You get instructions, you complete these instructions, and you get a reward. The casino gets unlocked around halfway through the story. As it increases in level, you unlock the ability to play 3 minigames to earn some coins. These are poker, slots, and concentration, the last one being a matching game. You also have a set of battles that earn you items and coins. These coins can then be exchanged for other items. Finally, you have the random cube. Like the name implies, it's randomly generated. It starts at level 1 and races in level with each time you clear it. The higher the level, the higher it gets, and based on these factors, the game generates a layout with different types of treasure, enemies, and number of floors. At the end of each dungeon, there is a boss battle that you must challenge in order to complete it. Outside of regular exploration and combat, you also have some ride dungeons to go through. In these, you ride a vehicle called Ride Machine. You explore wacky 90-degree cyberspace just like on foot, mostly. Sometimes you have these walls that require sufficiently powerful drill to pass through. You get the first drill just a few minutes after your first visit, and the rest you will acquire as you progress in the game. Destroying these walls also recovers a bit of the Ride Machine's armor and energy. Combat with the Ride Machine, however, is a different can of worms. The vehicle has a number of base stats that can be upgraded by finding the respective upgrades in the dungeons and then bringing them back to the base. It also has 3 slots in which you can install support equipment. Like the forces, this equipment provides various effects. Instead of random encounters, you have FOEs. I'm sorry, you have guardians, who start chasing you to the ends of the earth if they see you. These are large beasts who you fight one-on-one. The machine has a set of actions that either expend or recover energy, and the main goal is to cycle through these actions in order to keep your armor and energy values high while still damaging the guardian. Each character can perform one of these actions each turn, and the order in which the participants act depends on their stats. For example, firing the main cannon requires charging it between 1 and 4 times. Charging it once costs 5 energy, but firing it recovers 30 energy. I'm pretty sure this isn't how thermodynamics work, but regardless, you can either fire it with only one charge, dealing low damage but instantly recovering 30 energy, or charge it 4 times for high damage but spending extra turns doing it and recovering 30 energy at the end. Other examples include doing a very weak attack that instantly recovers 15 energy, attacking with the drill for 30 energy, or recovering the machine's armor for 25 energy. It's a constant tug of war between offense and defense, because holy crap, some of these guardians are tough. They sure look cool when they're kicking your ass though. Enemies in regular combat use 2D sprites, but the guardians use 3D models, and pretty well animated models at that. Full disclosure here, I'm running the game through the PPSSPP emulator, which lets games be rendered at a way higher resolution that the game would run on an actual PSP. But even so, these things look pretty cool. For comparison, this is how it looks upscaled from its original resolution, but keep in mind that the PSP screen is pretty small compared to most monitors. Shrink it down to the PSP screen size and it looks something like this. The emulator also has a couple of minor graphical bugs that aren't present in a real PSP. But anyway, this doesn't mean that the regular combat screen looks bad. Far from it, in fact. The presentation is quite simple, but the developers made that simplicity count. The camera constantly moves around the screen, making the visuals a bit more dynamic. Your characters also appear on the screen during their attacks, which helps it look more visually interesting than if they simply used 2D effects on top of the sprites. And if you're worried that this will make battles a slog, well, worry not, because there is an option to skip animations. The sprites themselves look pretty good too, with their stylized outlines contrasting against the darker parts. Sweet dreams. The only problem with this system is that, since your party's attacks are rendered in 3D, sometimes it looks a bit weird. But this is a really minor thing, so who cares? A more substantial complaint can be thrown at the difficulty, mostly in the first cube. Some of the first few boss battles are by far some of the hardest, and every random encounter ends with your party getting trashed. And like many other RPGs, you don't exactly have many options at the start. This can be excused a bit by the plot, since the hero characters were stripped of their powers, but I feel like it's just a tad too brutal at the beginning. Like this battle against 3 Hambrabis, who can stun your entire party, do enough damage to take down a character in a single turn, and are generally a pain in the ass. Things get significantly more soft once you get the heal force, which heals 200 HP for a measly 3 SP. The difficulty also balances out the further you advance in the story, and by the midpoint of the second cube it won't be so bad. Lost Heroes definitely leans towards the hard side, but after the start it rarely feels unfair or straight up dickish, and things like equipment upgrades help turn the odds in the player's favor. I also feel like the Ultraman characters are kind of a liability due to the color timer mechanic. They certainly are more powerful thanks to their higher base stats, but not to a degree that deserves such a nasty handicap. Sure, it's not a problem during most random encounters, since those can usually be finished in 2 or 3 turns, but it's a real pain during boss battles since they tend to take longer. Since the red state does increase their critical hit chances, there's probably some trick to take advantage of it, but I couldn't be asked to test it. And now let's talk about the ride machine sections. As cool as they might look and sound, they also get old really quickly. Each section only has a handful of different guardians, and because the battles tend to be less about your party setup and more about spamming the cannon, drill and recover actions at the right time, they tend to get tedious fairly quickly. There is no variety against each individual guardian enemy, so once you figure out what works best, battles all start to play out the same. But because they still hit pretty hard, you always have to spend some turns on the defensive, slowing the whole process down. Besides that, I don't really have much else to criticize besides a few nitpicks. Like the fact that technically there is a bit of voice acting, but the developers might as well have not even bothered because each character only gets like half a dozen of voice lines and one of them is a generic one used by multiple skills. There's also that thing I mentioned about the general purpose crossover skills, where they just play the regular animations. Equipment has to be unequipped before you can upgrade it too, which is a minor annoyance. A few of the dungeon music tracks are also a bit boring, I guess. They're supposed to be atmospheric, but come on, you can be atmospheric without making the music just some background noise. This should also be obvious at this point, but I haven't played the 3DS version. Or rather, for some reason, I was convinced that it didn't exist until I started editing the video. From what I hear, they are the exact same aside from two key differences. One is that the 3DS version takes advantage of the two screens and shows the auto map on the bottom one. The other difference is that the 3DS version does not have custom soundtrack support. Besides that, just choose whichever you want, I guess. In March of 2015, a sequel simply titled Lost Heroes 2 was released for the Nintendo 3DS. As a bonus, it included a download code for Lost Heroes Bonus Edition. I haven't played it myself, but from what I read online it improves on some of the original game's flaws. Supposedly there has been some rebalancing done to the combat, the interface was improved, some extra voice lines were added, and the raid dungeons became less of a chore. Unfortunately, it seems like acquiring Bonus Edition is a challenge in itself. It was never released separately, and in August of 2015, just 5 months after Lost Heroes 2's release, they stopped distributing it through the normal method. On the page where you would previously input the download code, there is now a notice saying that you can contact Bandai Namco's customer service directly in order to download the game, but who knows if that still works in 2019. And that's not all. Lost Heroes 2 had two versions, the regular one and the more expensive premium edition. The download code was supposed to come with both, but due to a mistake, copies of the premium edition didn't actually come with the download code included, so customers would have to contact customer support and sort it all out. Well done, Bamco, well done. I guess you could say that they lost it. But while I'm sure that the bonus edition is the definitive version, Lost Heroes on the PSP still stands as a very solid dungeon crawler on its own. And while it's very much a fan service game, it has enough in terms of gameplay to appeal to fans of dungeon crawlers who aren't into the competitive hero universe.